You're looking at the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. On Apple, recommend Apple Podcasts. And on Android, we recommend Spotify. Also, check out the Five Reasons YouTube content for everything from Messi and Company, that's our soccer podcast, to 3 yards per carry and more. You can follow the Dolphins daily updates there from Alfredo Arteaga. Go to the Five Reasons YouTube channel for that. Like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Also, Off the Floor, that's our Discord server. Apparently, people aggregate off this thing. You can just see it for, well, not for free. I was going to say for free. $2.99 a month. Link right here in the description. The place for the most heat anywhere, most heat information and conversation. If you're not there by now, why not? This is becoming the biggest Miami Heat community, and we plan for it to get bigger. Also, Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. You get 50 to play right away. Prize Picks is the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Again, prizepicks.com, daily fantasy in the state of Florida, legal, simplified. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne,
yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds.
down to Biscayne.
Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. We're going to go back and try to fill in some gaps for episodes that we probably should have done before, but we were focusing on the guy going out instead of the guy going in, which I think most of you can probably understand because we were talking a lot about Duncan Robinson and not a lot about Simone Fontecchio, who he was actually traded for. Simone Fontecchio, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that, but I'll do my best. Who he was actually traded for in what was, obviously one of these typical NBA deals where you're not really trading for the player, you're trading for the contract. Duncan was able to get money from Detroit, places close to where he went to college. They needed a shooter. They didn't have Malik Beasley. Obviously, that wasn't going to work out anymore. Tim Hardaway Jr. signed a minimum contract with Denver, so they were looking for a couple of shooters. They ended up getting 2, and Duncan was a fit there. But also, you had to get something back in the deal. The Heat did not get a draft pick back in the deal. I know there's some frustrated with that, but again, there were a lot of circumstances behind the scenes that played into that I have some awareness of. And so they end up getting a player in Fontecchio who has hurt the Heat before. He's had 2 of his biggest games ever over the course of his career right in front of us in the arena. He was in one of these situations that you reminded me, and I said it at the time, he was like Wayne Ellington or Malik Monk. There are these players that have just like busted out against the Heat. Of course, Ellington ended up joining the Heat now as a coach. Well, first as a player and then as a coach. He tore up the big 3 Heat. Like he did it 3 different times. He had a 30-point game, and then he wouldn't score anything the next night. Like, and no offense to Wayne, but like it was just this all over. It was one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, but like all over the place. And Malik Monk, I remember being in the arena, and I think you guys gave me a hard time about this because I tweeted out that he was the only Kentucky guard who hadn't amounted to anything, and then he scored like 37 that night or something like that, and he's been a very effective player since. So I should get a commission on all of the salaries he's gotten after. And then there was Fontecchio, who I think the Jazz were coming in trying to lose one night, Brady, and he just kept scoring. Right. I think they actually took a lot of their players off the floor in the fourth quarter, from what I recall, in an effort to lose the game. That was one of the most blatant tanking jobs I've ever seen. But he went nuts as a shooter. And now he's a member of the Miami Heat. They could waive and stretch him, but they haven't done it yet. And the questions I'm going to ask you are this, okay? One is, how does he get back to the level that we've seen against the Heat instead of a guy who admitted in his Zoom call with us that he was not a very good shooter last year? And the second question is, they did a similar thing They did a similar thing with Kyle Anderson, where they got Kyle Anderson. They weren't really supposed to keep him. Toronto couldn't go through with all parts of the trade because they traded for Brandon Ingram. So essentially, the Heat held on to Kyle Anderson. But I was told the same thing about Kyle Anderson at the time that I was told about this player, which is that, well, some in our coaching staff kind of like him. And so we're going to see what we could do with him. And Kyle Anderson ended up giving them effective minutes at times. Of course, now he's been since traded. So I'll start with this question: how does he get back to? Can he be that player that we've seen against the Heat? Because if they get that player, I mean, he can be an effective stopgap player at the very least.
The big question is he closer to the version we saw in 2023, 2024 compared to this past season? And the thing that's mainly different, other than the fact that he mentioned that he shot worse, was his role was completely different. I mean, you mentioned him playing out there with Utah and they took everybody off the floor. That was kind of his role in Utah. I think he played 50 games with the Jazz that season before he got traded. And I think he started in 34 of them. So he was kind of a main part of that team and had a major role. So his job was kind of get up 8 to 10 threes a game, and he could get up a bunch of shots up and kind of get into a rhythm. And he kind of found that rhythm, and then it led into him getting traded to Detroit. In Detroit, he kind of found the same success at the end of that specific season, and he was still just shooting at a high level. Then, as you mentioned, it got into last year where his role diminished a little bit. They had a bunch of shooters come in like Beasley and Hardaway. He was playing, I think, bumped down to like 15 minutes a game in the games that he did play. He was pretty available for Detroit, even though he was kind of logging just not part of their regular rotation. He still was pretty available for them. And the big question for me is you want to lean and say these shooters, like it comes and goes. So like he could have a season where he shoots 42% from three again. Like you don't know. But his role to me is going to be closer to the one it was last year than the one the year prior. And I think that's kind of where the question marks are going to come in, is because when I said last year for Detroit, he was kind of, maybe on the fringe of the rotation and playing 15 minutes a game. It's kind of what I envision this season. I actually think he's going to be playing more than some people anticipate. I said that on a recent episode we did where I said kind of one of my hot takes of the season is I think he is a rotation player. Like if they bump this rotation to 10, he's the 10th guy to me. And you bring up Kyle Anderson, it is interesting just because of the factor of not only him just coming in and like them like having to deal with it. It's like, okay, we'll take this guy. We can find a role for him. But also the fact that Spo liked Kyle Anderson a lot. Like he like actually had a real liking for him and his style of play, his high IQ and all that stuff. And I kind of imagine the same thing with Fontecchio. I think he's going to be somebody that Spo is going to be like, well, maybe we should play this guy because we need a little bit more shooting in this lineup. And it's like, okay, maybe it's going to probably be somebody that you don't want to see getting knocked out of the rotation. That's going to be the conversation, I think, at many points of the season is like, oh, wait, Larson's getting a DNP, but Fontecchio is playing 23 minutes. Like that I could see that on many nights just because I think Spo is going to want the specialist that's not on the roster no more without Duncan and Max before and everybody else down the line. I think they're going to lean into this a little bit. So how do they get him back at that level? It's his role is just going to be simple. It's not going to be as Duncan Robinson coded to me. It's not going to be him running off constant handoffs, but I think he's a guy that they're going to stick in the corner. It's going to be closer to Alec Burks than it is to Duncan Robinson. That's the way I view it. It almost like Spo's going to use him in that way where it's like some nights he doesn't play, but other nights he's going to be out there for a good portion of time because maybe he has it going and he's hitting a bunch of catch and shoot threes in the corner. And the difference is with him compared to Burks is he is a little bit bigger. He's somebody that can kind of size up defensively and they can find, gaps for him to defend. And he's also just a bigger player offensively. So he's interesting in that way just because I think they're going to find a trust for him to kind of be a plug and play guy.
Well, the defensive part, I want to get to that because that will lead Spoelstra one way or the other. Like this is not a team that has a ton of elite individual defenders. I think Bam, obviously, well, not I think Bam, obviously Davion for what he does. Yes. I think Wiggins and Highsmith can get to that level. We've seen it over the course of their careers. And that's pretty much it, right? Like, I mean, obviously, we're not talking Tyler, Norm. I don't think anybody's thinking he's going to be elite. You hope he gets back to average. I think there's a chance of that based on the metrics and what we've seen in recent years. Am I missing anybody? I mean, I don't think that Kaz is going to play a lot. I think he's got the potential. And then Larson, right? Larson, I think we believe has a chance to be an above average defender. But there and then Keshad, but again, I don't think he's going to play much. So, and I don't know exactly what his role is going to be. Jovic, you're just hoping he can be again passable for what they're asking him to do. And then Ware, but you're not asking Ware to guard a lot in space or any of that kind of stuff. You're asking him to clean up the mess and not give up a ton of defensive rebounds because he's chasing blocks and stuff like that. So I mean, I don't I don't know that he's going to want to throw a guy who can't compete defensively in the mix with this group, but they do need shooting. So so here's the thing, like, can he defend well enough in your, because he talked a lot about that in his presser and it seemed genuine that he believes he's a good defender.
I don't know if this is the perfect comparison, but it is kind of interesting. Is Cole Swider when he came in, Miami liked him. I mean, he was a gunslinging shooter that they needed to kind of get into the two-way realm, try to work his way up the roster. But he was just so rough defensively. And I mean, look, it's still happening to this day. He's still playing summer league for the Lakers right now and having that. And it's still a problem. It's like he has these big shooting nights, but the question is the defensive side of it. Fontecchio to me is somebody that's like just as good of a shooter. Obviously, he's doing it at NBA level, but is serviceable defensively. And that's kind of what they wanted specifically from that type of player. They wanted somebody that, look, he's like 6'8", 210. And I mean, he's not somebody that you want guarding at the point of attack and trying to stay with these small guards on switches, but he is somebody that could guard on certain wings. He's somebody that can move his feet a little bit and just can play physical defense. I mean, look, let's just compare it to the guy you got traded for, the Duncan Robinson. I mean, he's a little bit bigger than Duncan, not in terms of height, but just in terms of pure size. And I mean, the question is, like, I don't think they're going to, it's similar because I don't think they're going to want to play him with Tyler. Like, there's going to be certain lineups, like Fontecchio is not a all the way plug and play guy where it's like, this guy's 3-and-D, we could play him with anybody. I think they're still mindful of certain lineups they want to play him in. But just in terms of, I think he can serve defensively, like guarding 3s and 4s. And I think that's ultimately what you want from a guy that you're, getting back and you're talking that's on the fringe of your rotation. That's all you could ask for. And really the pop factor is, we talk about with all these guys, it's like, okay, can he take the next level as a driver? Can he, find this part of his game, the passing, this or that? When it comes to a guy like Fontecchio and just as you trying to get a sharpshooter, just a specialist, I just want that guy to go out there and have a confident shot. Like I think sometimes a new team, and we've seen this with guys that have gone out and guys that have come in for Miami, but sometimes a new situation clears their mind. Like the times when Duncan was struggling, like in the past, when we talked about trading, I imagine him going to another team and immediately lighting it up because you get to a new situation and a new system and you just kind of clears your head a little bit. You kind of opens things up. Coming off the season that Fontecchio just had where he feels like he could have shot a lot better, I see a situation where he could come out and shoot the ball at a high level. So I don't know if it's closer to the season prior or the one in 23-24, but I do think it's kind of in the middle of that because it's going to be the minutes of this past season. But I'd imagine it's going to be closer to probably 38% from 3 just because it's a better situation with probably, I'm not saying better situation in terms of Miami to Detroit, but I think there's more of an opportunity this year for him than the one he had last year.
Well, like I said, they need shooting. I mean, that's the deal there. All right, on the other side of this, we're going to talk about other shooters. You mentioned the type of shooter he is, but I want to deep dive into that just a little bit more. But before we do, during the season, we do the X-ray of the play of the day with our friends at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. If you work in a medical office, reach out to Nelson, his family, his team. They do a great job for you. They will bring the X-ray equipment and staffing to you. So here's where you find it. Again, you can fill out the form really easy. If you're looking on YouTube right now, you can see where you can do that at the top on the contact page, c-armandstaffing.com. That's c-armandstaffing.com. The phone number, reach out to Nelson directly, 561-891-9620. That's 561-891-9620. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm Staffing Services or c-armandstaffing.com. All right, now let's get into comparisons. Okay, now the Heat have had a lot of different types of shooters. You've mentioned a couple of them. I go way back. Some of these are going to go before your time. If you look at in the Riley era, probably the first shooter that they had who got heavy minutes was a former second-round pick from Milwaukee named Vashawn Leonard, who they brought in, and he became kind of a he and Dan Marley kind of switched off as the starters on the Zoe Tim teams. And Leonard these days would be getting up a ton of threes. I mean, it's pretty much what he did. He was a physical defender, but he wasn't a great defender. Couldn't really handle very well, but he could shoot it. I mean, in these days, he would shoot a lot. So they had him in the late 90s. Again, Dan Marley was a distance shooter. And again, today he would be getting a lot up. Also, early in his career, he would have been above the rim a lot as well. But then as you go forward, you look at the types of players they had. They didn't really get into the shooting specialist thing until Spo, honestly. Like even in the if you look at like the Stan year, they didn't really have like a knockdown guy there. That's the 03-04 team. They had Odom, they had Karan, they had Dwayne was obviously not a knockdown shooter, especially at that point. Rafer Alston, others. They had they had Damon Jones playing off of Shaq as kind of a spot up shooter. Couldn't really defend, couldn't really dribble that well, but he could shoot. You two on Shaq, he'd kick it out to Damon. Damon would make an open shot. So this is something that really didn't come to being until, honestly, Duncan. They haven't had a ton of them. Okay, Duncan. I mentioned Wayne Ellington was somebody that they brought in from the outside. If you look at all-time 3-point makes for Miami Heat players, you're going to find guys who are not really 3-point shooters on that list. Like I think Tim Hardaway was first or second on this list. Let me go through it here. Number 1, Duncan Robinson. Not a surprise. Tyler Herro is number 2. Now, some of this, again, you have to adjust for inflation, right? Obviously, a lot more threes are shot these days. It's like pre-Curry and post-Curry, right? But if you look at the rest of this list, and I just lost it, I'm sorry. If you look at the rest of this list, they're trying to sell me some meals. Hardaway is 3rd, 806. Eddie Jones is 4th, was not really known as that type of a player. He was like a skilled scorer, slasher, but could also make a 3. Timmy had a knuckleball jumper. Like Tim started settling for more threes because he couldn't move the way he did in Golden State when he was explosive. Number 5, the ultimate shooter probably in Heat history, Glenn Rice. But again, that's pre-Riley. Okay, so I talk about the Riley era. He traded him. And then the next guys on the 3-point list, Mario Chalmers, again, playing off of a superstar, very effective at his role, but mostly a spot-up guy. Goran Dragic, who we never really thought of as a 3-point shooter first, although he could make 3-point shots. Again, more of an attacker. Josh Richardson in his 2 roles, but not the kind of player that you ran off a bunch of curls. Dwayne and Vashawn Leonard, who I mentioned. And then you finally get to Ellington and Strus. So this is not like we saw, they got to find a shooter. They have gone through a good portions of their history without a shooter. It's just that they had Duncan and Strus on the roster at the same time. And when they had the 2 of them on the roster at the same time, Spo, as he spoke to me about this, he felt he had to make a choice. He could really only play one a lot, and it was Strus who passed Duncan before Strus left. So do you really think this is a necessary role?
Yeah, because a lot of the teams that we're talking about, even let's say the Jimmy era ones, had shooting on them. The big 3, their role players, they had shooting around. This was a situation coming in where we were talking about this team needed more shooting, just because look, they're leaning into the big lineup with Bam and Ware. You need shooting around that. We're talking about needing help for Tyler. They got that in Powell. They're running these defensive lineups with Haywood and Davion, who both shot well from 3 this past year. But are you going to see that next year? We'll see if it stays at its same level. You just need depth at that position, I believe. And it's not like you need, because look, they leaned away from Duncan for over the last few years consistently. And that's like their guy. And they still kind of leaned away with it, even when he had it going. Like they were not really leaning on the specialist thing fully, but you need a guy. That's why I keep calling him like the 10th man. I just think they need somebody that they can throw into the rotation when they need a spark. Ideally, you don't need that spark as much this season with Powell and Tyler. Like you have more range with the 3-point stuff, and maybe Wiggins can get more up if he's playing a little bit more off ball. We'll see how that all shakes out, but I think it just feels like they have to lean into like Fontecchio to me is way more Strus than he is Duncan, like just as a player and everything, and they need more of a Strus than a Duncan right now. I know they just lost Duncan, so you would think they need a perfect Duncan replacement, but with this version of this team, with the fact like Duncan was needed when they didn't have any actions to get to. And it's like, okay, we don't have a ball handler, like big time pick and roll player on the floor right now. we're just going to go to the Bam Duncan handoff, and that's going to be our way of creating some offense. With this version of this team, they have some guys that can handle. They have Davion who could create a little bit for others. You have Nico, who we want to see put the ball in his hands. We're going to have Powell and Tyler, they're going to be their primary ball handlers. Bam is still somebody that's going to be working up the face-up game. The point is that the type of shooter that they need is somebody like Max, who was just standing around the corner, flying off a down screen, taking those type of shots, and that's more Fontecchio's play style. So it's not even just, I guess we overuse maybe the word specialist a little bit. It's just they needed a good three-point shooter to throw into the mix when it's needed. They needed depth at that position, and they have that. It's somebody that's spoken into.
The thing that gets lost all the time here, especially in the conversations of trading him or what you're going to pay him or all that, is that Tyler Herro is their best shooter. Yeah. I mean, especially now, we can argue about Duncan, obviously, if you were to put both of them. I mean, Tyler won a 3-point contest, but if you were to put both of them out there to just shoot, 3,000 shots, probably Duncan wins that competition, probably, okay? But as far as doing it in game with volume in a variety of different situations, Tyler's their best shooter. And now they've added another guy in Norm who is really, really good at a lot of these metrics as a shooter. So I don't know that the role is totally necessary if they can get some shooting from somewhere else, like Jovic. Okay, that's a big one, right? Is Haywood going to get minutes and still be around that 34 to 36% on 4 attempts? Okay, can he be a little bit more consistent there? Is Jaquez getting minutes and any better from there than he was? Does Bam's volume go up a little bit and his percentage stays the same? Can you trust Ware to shoot an occasional one? They could have and Dave. We've talked about Davion to death. He's not going to shoot what he shot for the Heat last year.
Pella is the question as well. Your entire bench has question marks with your 3-point shooting. Like there could peak. You could see your best moments like you had at points last season. Or it could dip like it did with Jaquez. And that's kind of the point is like, if you're 4 or 5 guys off the bench that we're talking about have question marks from 3, there's a chance that if they do dip, like Fontecchio is the guy that ends up in the rotation. But ideally, absolutely ideally, that's not the case. Like ideally, Jovic is peaking from 3 and has it consistently. And Larson has that develop like that. Those are the kind of the big question marks. But he's kind of, is this like the high floor guy on the team that's like, when needed, he's the guy that you can trust.
I think he's the break glass. I think he's the break glass in case of emergency guy. Although I think he could have a camp that look when you see a player for the first time up close. Okay, you again, he had a couple games against the Heat, and they've scouted him, and they knew what he was. They know he's not Duncan, but when you see him up close in your training camps, you start to find some things there that you did. And we hear this from Spo all the time. We didn't really know he could do this. That's a favorite pet phrase of Spo early in the years. And then they start to dig into that a little bit, and they're like, okay, let's put this out there and see if he can give us a little bit more than we expected. I can see that happening, and then I can see him being phased out over the course of the season as they get more comfortable with the shooting of the others. That's where I feel like this ultimately goes. And then, and I hate to say it because, again, he seems like a very nice guy, and we want everybody to succeed here. But it seems like he then could end up getting squeezed out of minutes after getting them earlier in the season, and then maybe even just getting waived and stretched at that point. But I think they can find a use for him as a bridge early in the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happens. All right, thanks, Brady. Appreciate it. Thanks to our sponsor, c-armandstaffing.com. If you want to sponsor 5 on the Floor, get in before October because we load them up in October. I know people complain there are too many ads here, but we don't want to get rid of the local sponsors because they've been so supportive of us, and we vet all of them. They all do great work, so we appreciate them joining us here. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. Have a good day, everybody.